Today on the London Ear, I'm delighted to be joined by a gentleman who has just released his brand new album, A Great
Uh,
Romantic Gesture. Mr. Billy Fitzgerald, thank you so much for joining me today on the London Ear.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, you're being all nice and quiet and polite now on the radio.
I am. Once you press the red button, I become a completely different personality, just to be as clean as possible, to be as accessible to the masses as I possibly can. Don't worry, I'll swear soon.
So listen, it's a while now since I first found your music, The Dead
Mm,
Flags, and I mean, I've played the band on the radio here recently, actually, as our Irish track from the vault because I love your music. I genuinely love your music, and there's days that I'd be walking down the street and that oh my, whatever.
yeah,
You don't
yeah.
want to hear me singing on the radio, but that goes through my head, and it's like Billy Fitzgerald. So he often comes up in my head. Um,
This is the thing is that there's parts of the songs that are wedged in people's heads they're immediately wedged in people's heads like for a week or thing. I was like, it's going to be wedged in your head for like 20 years. It doesn't. It's like, I don't know what it is. Like I don't know why it is that, but there's certain bits that people are always saying to me. God, I was singing that the other day. It's crazy.
But that's great, though. That's great.
Yeah,
That means there's a hook that people it kind of sticks. It sticks
yeah,
with people, and for me, it always reminds me of Rap Mines
yeah.
and everything that went on around Rap Mines at that time. That was about what 2000 and I can't even remember.
It was. I think it was 2007 to about 2012 was the Red Flags, and yeah, crazy. It's hideously long ago now. It just the way it feels like 3 years ago and 25 years ago at the same time. So yeah, it's a very funny one. I live in Rathmines still, and I there's places around here that remind me of the band, and there's still people that will like ask you to play certain things. Like they'll remember a song from the band days, and yeah, it's amazing. Some people are very passionate about the band. Other people have never heard me, so great.
Well, I suppose that's a good thing and a bad thing because it means that you're going to get fans of the Dead Flags, and then you're
Mm,
going to get your own new people as well coming on. And I mean,
mm,
this album of yours, it's your debut album, but it's been a long time coming because the EP, if I remember correctly, your EP was called An Introduction, and that was about like
hmm
7 years ago.
That was several years ago. Yeah, it's hilarious. I was saying to somebody, it's like, God, yeah, I've been working on this album for a few years now, and the way the pandemic just interrupted everything, and you think 2020 was 2 years ago maybe, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, all right. So my handy thing is like, oh, I've been making it for a few years, and then the pandemic kind of got in the way. Is my handy lie for saying how long it took to get this together. Yeah, it's very. An introduction was supposed to be like it was trying stuff out, but I was intending to put out an album like a year or two after that, and life really got in the way. Like just so much has happened, and when I was kind of like, I was only when you're in when you're a solo artist, there's no other momentum. You're the only person. So if oh, I'm going to do this or we're going to move house or something like that, suddenly that's 6 months of work on stuff gone. So I think I was writing in the liner notes of the album is like this album took far too long to make, and I was like, that's the first line of the liner notes because it didn't take 10 years to make the album. It's probably took about 2 years all told, just spread over over 10 years. But yeah, thanks for pointing out that it's taken years of
But
the EP.
if we're when something is
Yeah,
worth waiting for, it's really worth waiting for. I mean, just
there you go. Yeah,
looking at this album cover is on its own, that's well worth waiting for.
yeah.
You in your gorgeous, is it a lilac-y suit on a purple
Li
background?
Lilac suit. Yeah, great.
Tell us a little bit about, I suppose, the you've managed to create this kind of persona for your musical self, I think. Tell us a little
Mm,
bit about that because you have a real fun side to the social media thing as well, whether it's
yeah.
you creating the videos, all that kind of stuff. Tell us a little bit about, is that you or is this Mr. Billy Fitzgerald?
Well, that's the funny thing is like for about a year I was trying to come up with a name, and I wanted the name not to sound like a person or a band or anything like that. And I ended up coming up with Mr. So I remember going through the whole process and going, I put two letters on the front of my name. But I did like that idea originally of being a different kind of persona or something. Um, there's a guy I know from the rehearsal studios that I use who kind of has a completely different name that I can't pronounce, and he's a drummer on one side and he's a singer-songwriter on the other side, and he gets to totally separate them. You know, if you Google it, you're never going to find the two people on the same thing. And I kind of, in some ways, I would have loved that. But the other part of it was talking to my wife about this. It's like she was just saying, like, maybe be yourself, like, as in figure out who you are with this. And that's kind of been a bit the mission. It's like half be the persona or be the fun, like lean into the funness of it. But it's also, it sounds very wanky altogether, but it's like trying to figure out who I am musically and why am I writing songs about this? Why am I writing songs about that? Why do the songs sound the way they sound? And a lot of the time that is like it's a bit of an adventure. It's kind of like no idea why that sounds like that. Let's tunnel into that. Let's figure like let's just keep going after whatever influence is happening. And then at the end of it, you're just going like, oh, it's because, like this is a bit of a persona, but it's also a bit more authentically me than maybe people realize. But I do feel that getting dressed up and, having a big colorful background and all this and dancing around the place and stuff, it's, I like being able to step outside myself and just do that because I think that's fun. I have a lot of fun doing that and it suits the songs. And I think that's the thing is that like I like being able to step into a slightly different world and be a slightly different person. Because otherwise, I think you get a lot of authenticity is a weird one. Where Chapel Roan, I think that is a really interesting example of that at the moment, where it's like being absolutely authentically her, but also wearing a mask all the time and wearing like being very operatic and stuff. And I think this is my tiny, tiny scale model of that. Um, so yeah, a lilac suit instead of a big painted face, I think is the idea there.
Do you remember a time when you could walk down the street and you would know when someone was in a band? You'd know by
Mm.
clothes that they were wearing.
Yeah, I think that's the thing is like I remember being really into kind of like singer-songwriter people. Like remember in the early 2000s in Dublin, and everybody was a singer-songwriter. It was like bands were unfashionable, but you had to be Damien Rice or whoever. And you could even spot the singer-songwriters with the beanie caps and the kind of like like the iron jumpers over their over their hands and stuff. There's like that uniform that people put on. I don't know what it is now. You can still see a kind of a rock band, I think, but it's harder. It's harder now because I think there's so many more musicians around. Um, but if you walk over by BIM in London or in Dublin, you'll see, like every the people who aren't in bands stand out. That's it.
Cool kids, the
Yeah.
cool kids.
Mm,
So, talking about your writing and what the
mm,
songs are about, when the writing, what way do you write? Do the lyrics come first? Is it a hook? Because one way or another, your music is always really catchy, and
yeah.
it's very uplifting as well, even though that mightn't always be kind of the reason behind you wrote the song or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. I think I was watching an interview with Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney's on every video recently. I don't know why, but he was talking about we had to write catchy songs so that we'd remember them. And I think that's part of the thing is that like you write all sorts of stuff and loads of stuff comes up, but it's the memorable hooks that actually stick with you and you want to do justice to them. I don't think I've ever really done lyrics first. It's always there's always one line and a melody or a hook come at the exact same time, I never know what I'm writing about ever. Like it always takes me like a year to figure out what a song is about. Like I know the mood or I know what's right for the song or what's not right for the song. But what happens to me is I'll just be walking down the street and just be or driving the car or something like that, and just something will pop into my head. It's like two ideas collide. They're both in there, bopping around the place, and the two of them collide. And it might be a rhythm, or it might be a kind of a melody hook, and one phrase or something will hit. And usually that's when they collide. That's the moment where the song is kind of born, and the rest of it is trying to figure out. It's almost like you're excavating around it, trying to go, oh, is that another bit? But I have a terrible tendency to go like, cool, I've got that. That's grand. I'm gonna get very lazy and not do the work to finish it off. So I that was what this so that's kind of the thing is that like you come up with a central idea and a hook and trying to do justice to that is the thing. And this whole album has been hilarious because I didn't know what style of music I was going to do. I didn't know what I wanted to write about, but loads of stuff just started to come. Loads of very different stuff just started to arrive, and it was really amazing that it all kind of came along in about a 2 year period, and it was just like nothing I'd written before. So it was kind of like it was like a little gift from somewhere. And then years later, I go like, oh right, that's about that, and that's maybe I was thinking about that other thing. So funny thing.
I saw you during the week mention on social media that you set yourself the challenge to write a song for Beyonce.
Yeah, that was the that was the interesting thing of like when I started out solo stuff. When I was in the Dead Flags, towards the end of the Dead Flags, I kept writing singles and writing radio singles, and I don't know why I was doing it, but I got really obsessed
Way,
with writing.
way ahead
Yeah,
of your time.
yeah. I mean, this thing, writing the catchiest things possible. That's what I was trying to do, and I wanted to challenge myself to do completely different stuff. So there was like I've written loads of sort of I think I said in that video I was talking about like I wrote a Bond theme a little while ago and I wrote an actual Eurovision song that I actually pitched the Eurovision and got rejected by RTE. That was one of my greatest moments. Uh, but like I love being challenged to do things like that. So one of them was I love the sound of Destiny's Child kind of when they did the Bee Gees cover Emotion and they had this the beautiful harmonies going on. It's really stripped back so that the voices are really, really clear. I was like, I was listening to that one day. I don't know why I was listening to it, but I was like, God, wow, imagine writing a song for a person that talented, or like what would I do with that? And it was a cool little challenge to try and write something in this, not in the style of somebody else necessarily, but like, remember when Johnny Cash, people were pitching songs to Johnny Cash when he was in the last 10 years of his life? That was another thing of like I love the idea of like what how would you write a song for Johnny Cash? You can't write a pastiche. You have to write something you that that would be in that might appeal to the other artist. So like yeah, writing a song for Beyonce was a hilarious challenge, but then immediately it's like I took it off in a direction that was just me. So it's yeah, I was a bit facetious there. Like there was no way I was ever going to try and sell us Beyonce,
And if
but
Beyonce comes along and or if she hears this and says, "Ooh, I wouldn't mind recording that," I mean, no, you're never not going to turn her down. You're going to give her free
this
reign or whatever, you know.
What this is I know I know there's a joke about all this stuff, but I think about that so seriously. Where I'm like, yeah, but Beyonce has like 20 writers in every song. Would I have to collaborate with another writer? What if they change this? What if they change? So I would love it, but also like I overthink everything. So that's where my brain just went when you said,
But it's like when you think about it, I know Simon Cowell,
yeah,
the time that I think it was the X Factor or American Idol or one of those things that they were putting the theme tune together. And he's a crafty guy. Let's
yeah,
be honest. He might be good at music or whatever, but he's a businessman.
yeah,
And he went into the room and when they were recording and it was like, oh, I think it needs triangle. I think this should go in here. Ding. So he's a writer. And he
there you
gets
go.
royalty from every time it's played.
Very clever.
Just
Yeah.
really, really clever stuff. Listen, it's time we heard some music from your album.
Mm.
What are we going to play? What are we going to play?
It depends on how long you want to go, but I think "Give Me Love" is a song to play there.
And why should we play
Since
this?
because we were just talking about it. But also I think there's about two or three songs on the album that I think show the range of the album, and that's one of that's one of that's one of the songs I think is an important one to hear.
Well, thank you for joining me today. It's great to catch up with you again after all these years. It's as I've said earlier, your music always makes me smile. It always, hey, I love your hooks.
Mm,
Always in my head for days afterwards. But you mentioned there that you get an idea in the first part of our interview. You mentioned that you get an idea and then sometimes it's just there and you kind of have to work at it and you have to make sure you
mm.
finish it and all that kind of stuff. So as a solo artist, I mean that it's tough kind of making sure that you have the motivation to do that, that you keep having the
Mm,
motivation to finish something. Because I know for me, if I'm not happy with something, or whether it's
yeah.
editing a video or whether it's messing around with something, and I'm not feeling it at that moment in time, it's like, ah, just leave it there and walk away and
Mm.
go on to the next thing. I mean, that's really easy to do. So, how much work do you put into the graft of songwriting?
I don't think I put enough work into it because like I put a lot of work into everything, and there's a thing when I was I think I wrote my first good song when I was maybe 17 or something like that. And I remember how easy it was to write it. And that's the tough thing when you're a bit younger and you don't really have to, like you don't have to be anywhere right now. Nobody's looking for you, nobody's anything. You can lose 3 hours working on a song because like you're just like you're loving it. I find it difficult now where there's so many demands on your time, it's including like your phone, like and getting distracted and procrastinating, that it is hard to kind of get into a zone of just working on it. But like that song "Give Me Love," when I had to record that last year, I'd recorded like 3 or 4 different versions of that song. I was never happy with where it was going, and I finally figured out what it needed to be, and I went in and I kind of locked myself into a studio that a friend of mine has, a little music room behind their house where you can just loads of instruments there, and he used to be a musician, and he loves me coming over and using it. So I just basically said I'm going in there at 11 a.m. and I'm not coming out until that song is finished. And I just work, once you get over the first 10 minutes and you get in the zone, you can you're gonna finish that thing. And I think songs require a lot of stuff, but you mentioned editing a video. I mean, it'll take you a few hours to shoot and edit an okay version of a 3-minute video. But like, it's so much easier to record a song. It's only 3 minutes long. You can do it. Like the Beatles recorded an album in it. Was it the first? They said with their first album took 10 hours to record, and the second one took even longer. This idea of that it doesn't take forever, even though it took me 10 years to make an album. It's like I can make it when I've kind of figured out what I want to do. I can make a song in an afternoon, and I love that. And sometimes just being that focused just gets you through all the indecision and the not finishing. So I find shutting out all the distractions and just focusing on it is great, and that's much easier to do as a solo artist, and it's much easier to do when you're self-producing and playing all the instruments as well, because you don't have to break it for anybody. You break your concentration. You just work on it. Um, but the songwriting part is the hardest part because, oh God, this needs another verse. Like, do I have the inspiration right now? Do I know what this is going to be? Um, that's the hardest part. I always find is the lyrics, getting the lyrics to be as good as they should be. I find that harder now than I used to. Yeah.
Two things from that I was going to ask you about.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about whether you play everything. You've said that you play everything, but
Mm.
as a solo artist, you kind of sometimes have to rely on other people
Yeah.
to get everything done. There might be something that's just out of your grasp. And the other thing is, it seems to be that more and more, if you're kind of going for, especially like top 40, I know not everybody wants top 40 radio,
Mm.
and I wouldn't be a huge lover of top 40 radio anyway. Um, but hey, if the big guys want to come and give me a gig, I'm not complaining. Um, but the thing is, it's kind of song wise,
Mm.
they're getting closer and closer to the 2 minute thing
Mm.
for songs again. So do you need that extra verse? Or does that extra verse kind of give it a roundedness?
Well,
It kind of finishes it off sometimes. It tells a story and it gives you a chance to end it.
yeah, I think there's a weird thing where when I was in the Dead Flies, even though we were like a rock band, I felt that, like I was saying, like I was trying to write singles. So if a song was over 3.5 minutes long, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I got to cut this down. And it was a nice challenge to do that. But on this album, I actually wanted to make sure that a few of the songs like beat 5 minutes because I'd never allowed myself to do that before. I know it's very indulgent to, especially now today to go on that long. But I wanted to do that sort of thing. I wanted to break that kind of habit of no, no, a song has to be, short. So a lot of the time I just didn't. I tried not to concentrate on how long the song is, and just try and feel it. Like what's the right length for it? Because there's a verse. So when I say like, oh, it needs another verse, it's like you feel the need for another verse, but you don't know like whether it's the song's 10 minutes or 2 minutes. But I think when you're on your own, like I wrote and arranged everything for the Dead Flags, and it to a bad extent of like telling the drummer what to do, telling the bass player what to do ultimately. And that was a really bad state of affairs. I've been like, I feel bad about that now because I was getting ahead. I was just like in a fever of writing. So I wouldn't want to wait a week to hear what the bass player could contribute. So I'd write the bass. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this album very much alone was to say, I need to get that out of my system. I need to actually just do it on my own to do it, and just if I'm trying to prove something to myself or if I'm a control freak, which I am, it's like just get that done so that I can say, okay, now let people in a little bit. And what's weird is you mentioned the photographs, the artwork, the drummer. I didn't play the drums on the album, but like those learning how to collaborate with those people was such a gift during the thing. Like going from my first thing of like telling the drummer what to do till the third or fourth song we were doing together, where it was just literally, here's the song and sit back and let him find his way. And I remember sitting there for 2 hours, not giving any direction except answering any questions or talking about what was cool or whatever. And just I learned by working with the same person over a bunch of different songs to let go a little bit and just chill out a bit. So by leaning into the control freak part, I ended up learning way more about collaboration. And that's I find that a little bit emotional for me because I have certain, mental health issues around things like that. And it's being able to learn how to trust and to let people in to that process has been so rewarding for me because it feels really special. It feels way better than, if I had informed the drummer, these are the drums. It feels so much better. And that's what I'm kind of excited about. Like I've been rehearsing with the drummer for the upcoming gigs and stuff, and it's like, letting somebody in again, um, after so many years of that has been really rewarding. Uh, Even if the album just sounds like, okay, I'm going to be Prince, I'm going to do everything on my own.
I think it's really special that that has happened because,
Mm.
like, if you're after working on, like, some people will hear it and they'll go, "Oh, there are a few songs. What are you talking about?" But I mean, it's a body. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? People
yeah,
who don't get art or don't get music or whatever.
yeah.
But you're after working on this for so long, and that's
Mm.
not slagging you off in any way. That's like it's genuinely. If you
Yeah.
didn't, if you're after putting a lot of hard work and effort into this to achieve something that lots and lots of people could only ever dream of. But through hard work and sheer determination, you're after doing that.
Mm.
And when it's something is that special and that precious, that because you're after working on it, to have someone else that you can collaborate and that
Mm.
you know is going to respect your work as much as you do, that's a big, big thing.
It's huge. And the irony of like being in a band and being dictatorial and being a solo artist and being open is is hilarious. But yeah, like again, like it's not like it took me 10 years to craft some like I don't know if like Scott Walker making these albums in his like shed on some moor somewhere, and you're like nobody knows what he's doing and he's working away at this thing, and it sounds insane. And it's like this is just breezy pop songs in a lot of ways. But yeah, they took a lot. I could not have released that album 2 years ago. And I kind of like I kept saying that to myself, like, oh, I could have finished this up. But it's like, no, I learned that. I learned that 6 months ago. I could not have done that if I hadn't, if I hadn't spent that time. And there's so many things on this album that like it's it feels like I went on a huge journey, and I don't really mind if it sounds like it's like didn't take that much effort, like if it does, because I know the journey I went on, and I'm kind of excited. I was saying to a friend of mine last night, I'm kind of excited to make another one because it's like, wow, I learned so much. I'd love to start at that point on the next one and see where it goes. It's so nice to like. to be proud of a piece of work like that. That's not usual for me, Nessie. That's like I'm very hypercritical of my own stuff, so I'm very happy to be happy with this album, you know.
So, as an artist now, what does success with this album look like? Or does it matter
Oof.
what happens? You've done your bit. It's
Mm,
what other people think of it. Is that relevant? Obviously, you want people to like your music, but is it more
mm.
important for you to like what's out there or for them to like what's out there?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I'm not gonna. I have very complicated feelings about like what I did with the Dead Flags and what I did before the Dead Flags because I hear a lot of the compromises and stuff. But I know the reason when I think back to say I love Gentleman's Club, our album. I think it's I couldn't listen to it for a long time, but I really like that album. But I know that the person who wrote those songs, for a lot of them, was trying to imagine what other people might like. So there was a lot of I still think I put them through the mill and made them something really special. But I know that at the core of some of the songs was me trying to imagine, oh, here's a single or here's an upbeat song for the end of the gig or something. Whereas, and what I learned from that was that if you write songs for other people, firstly, that doesn't guarantee that anybody's going to like it. But if you don't like it, then what have you got if it doesn't like hit with other people? And it doesn't matter whether it's chart success or anything like that. What I learned and I knew this going into recording this album was this has got to be something that I love. And if I'm the only person that loves it, that is good enough. Now, I needed to release it. I felt like I couldn't just record it and just put it on the shelf, but I needed to be a fan of this album because I can't control anything else. I can't, there's no other, uh, there's nothing I can't force people to like it or to listen to it or play it on the radio or do anything like that. But I can control whether I think it's good enough right now or if I want to go harder on it. And what's cool is I sat down with the test pressings when they came back from the vinyl plant. It was a novel experience for me. And I just sat there on my own listening to the album. And I was just like halfway through, I was kind of overwhelmed by, I really like this. Like, this is very me. So I think that's, that's what sorry. I have to edit that out. I think that's the thing that for me, that's the most important thing is I think that's success. And everything else is sure we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Personally, I don't think you can ask for any more than that,
Mm,
really, because once you're putting, if you want to go into the music business side of things, if you're putting
yeah,
out the best product that you can't ask any more of yourself
yeah.
whatsoever.
Well, there's an interesting thing as well. That this is going back to the thing of like when I was in the band and like see you've been involved in music for as long as I have or I don't know like we've been around through a huge change in the music industry.
Yeah.
And in a way, you've been active in it. I've just been kind of like checked out of the race, like just working on music, and then I come back in to try and you know put a single out, and it's like, oh, it's completely different than it used to be. The things that matter don't matter anymore, or new things seem to matter. And I found that really hilarious in a lot of ways. Like, oh, I think I'll take as long as it takes to make to make a record, and then it's like the industry's gone. Like all the, like, oh, I'd love to play that venue. That venue's gone. Like everything has just changed or disappeared. And I don't know what you feel about the how the quote unquote industry is going, whether these are good things or bad things, but like it just is so crazily different that I don't see any point in trying to almost keep up with it. It's like I think I'll just make good music and then I'll try and make sure that people hear it. And it's the only thing I can do because I'm not young enough to be like like a TikTok star or something like that. Uh, and I'd rather just be putting on shows and for people. And if it hits with people, great, fantastic. But like you mentioned, top 40 radio. What the hell is that?
Couldn't tell you.
What's the chart?
It's
Uh,
yeah, I mean, from my point of view, where the music industry is concerned, you have all
mm,
these guys who get millions and millions of streams,
yep.
and I think half of them are like social media stars right now more than anything else.
Yeah,
But for me, the music industry and what is the work in music industry is what happens in your locality, what happens in your
yeah,
area, and supporting the local people that are around you. Because again, going back to COVID and what happened there, it was the arts that kept us going.
yeah,
And ultimately, we need to support our local artists. We need to support our local venues. That's why I'm always shouting out, and people are probably fed up of me doing it, but we always need to try, if we can afford to support our local artists, to support them, whether it's even buying one track at a time or buying a t-shirt or buying whatever. If you
yeah,
can't do that, share their stuff on social media. Just spread the word as much as you can because no one can afford all these ads on social media and on different platforms. It's all ridiculous. So the
yeah,
best we can do is try and look after our own local independent artists wherever you are in the world. Just try and do that because then people will find out and people move from one city to another and they'll spread the
yeah.
word and things like that. And as far as I can see, that's the only way there is.
And I think that's the bit operating around Dublin. The scene here has changed quite a bit for a for low level independent artists just kind of looking for audiences. I think it's more difficult now than it seems to be more open and there's all this stuff. But if you go around, people are better than I've ever seen before. Like people operate like the talent of singers in general is nothing like it was 20 years ago. Like the incredible ability, because I think people have been like basically pushing themselves to be better and better and better at singing. I'm not sure about, say, songwriting or the style of music, but people make a great racket now. You don't see the same kind of like crappy three piece and Eamon Doran's kind of kind of thing, which is where I would have come out of. You don't see that as much. You just see like really talented people, and I think the interesting thing though is like venues are really struggling, and I think that's the thing that COVID did it, but also like, venues are leaning into covers bands and, like just having a playlist on instead of having live music. And that's hard, I think, because that's a chicken and the egg thing of like, which is like, should it be the venues trying to foster a scene? Should it be the scene trying to, demanding a venue? And I know in Britain that's been a really bad thing of like, the amount, I don't know the numbers, but the amount of venues that have closed. And it's not just COVID. And I think that's the hardest part for me because what I would love to do right now is go on a little tour of Ireland playing little 50-person rooms. That would be fantastic. Could I get a crowd in Cork or Limerick? No, but it would be, there's only a few promoters working around Ireland at the moment that put on, you know, groups of acts that will play, over a thing, and they build up a small audience. Every 2 weeks they put on a show. People come from all over the country to perform at it. That's not that common in Ireland. I don't know if it is in the UK, but they're the kind of nights where I'd love to see a resurgence of that kind of thing because I think you learn a lot as an artist going and playing to receptive audiences, but also skeptical audiences. People who are willing to give you a chance, but aren't going to fawn over you just because you're making music. That's the bit where I would be hopeful in the next few years that that sort of thing will come back a bit because I think I was watching a video where they were talking about like, AI and all that sort of stuff. It's like the one thing you can't fake is getting up there with, and sing and performing and singing your own song in front of people without any, with just a guitar or just a piano. And that's really special. And I think it's kind of, there's something about that that will stand the test of time a bit. And I kind of feel like that's the bit that could come back. So that's why I've doubled down onto having loads of loop pedals and synths and things like that. Yeah, but I really want to get back out a bit into those places, but I'm kind of like, that's what it makes me optimistic, but I'm worried that venues won't survive, you know. Um,
So if you can get out, this
yeah,
is this is like a little plea, I suppose, to all our listeners. If you can get out to
mm,
your venue this week or over the next couple of weeks, do go and support your artist. And if it's not a big artist, if it's, you don't have to be always spending 70 quid on a ticket. Go and pay a fiver or a tenner in and
Yeah.
just go out and spend a few hours and hear some new music. You never know, you might find your next favorite band, or your next
It,
favorite artist.
yeah, if you're from a town, a small town that has a pub that gets people in from out, like acts in from out of town, go because you will see amazing stuff. You not every time, but you'll see amazing stuff for a fiver. You will see great stuff, and the corners of pubs are amazing venues, and they're the bits. So yeah, I'd encourage everybody to, and also go into Bandcamp and buy people's records when you like them. If you're streaming them and you've listened to them more than once, do try and throw them buy their album. You don't have to listen to it on Bandcamp, but you can. They'll get so much more from you buying their record for a tenner on Bandcamp than any amount of time you could ever listen to them on Spotify.
So I was going to ask you then, so where's the
Mm.
best place to get?
Oh, there you go.
So yeah, you've done that for me. So what's your little URL on Bandcamp or
Well, at the moment, you can just go to mrbillyfitzgerald.com and it'll send you to Bandcamp at the moment. But like, yeah, I've been selling stuff on Bandcamp for years, but this is the first time I've kind of gone into physical stuff there. So I have I've yeah, I've printed up like a short run of vinyl, so it's kind of like it's a beautiful thing, and it's all lovely gatefold sleeve and heavyweight vinyl and stuff. But the main thing for me is I wanted to experience listening to my music on record, so that was cool. But yeah, I'm going to start selling like merch through that and things and see how it goes. There's been a load of people have been purchasing the record this week, and it's great because yeah, it's very different when you get an email saying so and so has bought your album on Spotify on Bandcamp and they've left you a little message. That's so lovely. It's so much lovelier than looking at a graph that said you had 19 listeners yesterday in these places around the world. It's so much warmer. So while it's great that somebody's listening in Melbourne, Australia to your stuff, there's just something very warm about somebody purchasing your record when they didn't have to, you know.
Billy? It has been absolutely fantastic catching up with you and
Yeah.
chatting to you today. Um, Hopefully we'll get you back on the show to talk about the next album, maybe.
Yeah. So in 10 years, is that that's my cadence.
Do you
Yeah,
know what? We'll probably be able to teleport or something at that stage.
there
And
we go. Yeah, well, I'm hoping that like there's just I think about it and then it just becomes an album at that point. I think
oh, it
that's
could do that. Yeah, it could do that.
yeah.
Listen, thank you so much for joining me today on the London Ear. And for
Well,
listeners, again, the album is called A Grand Romantic Gesture.
thank you. Well, thank you for having me on and thank you for also supporting not only Irish music but just independent music in general. It's yeah, it's great. I just love being on the show, so thank you.
No worries. What are we going to play to finish off?
I think we should play Work for It because that is yeah, that's my one of my favorite. That's probably my favorite song on the album, and I'm going to be pushing that a little bit. So, work for it, please.
Brilliant. Listen, off you go. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.